Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you a video for all of my cronies. Guys, I know it's been a while. I miss y'all. I miss my cronies. I had to get on here and make a video just talking about Necrons. And recently I did some videos talking about Grey Knights. So I want to do something similar for Necrons and kind of talk about why I haven't been playing them as much, why I haven't been focused on them as much. And I think it's been kind of a creative block per se, and just some difficulties that I notice, and some patterns and stuff I've seen in Warhammer in the past, Games Workshop's responses and reactions to things, and the possible future of some of the things for the army. So that's kind of where it comes into this today, is talking about some of what we're looking at for Necrons today from a competitive sense and seeing them on the table. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notifications to get notified on all the content that we bring here to you on the channel, including more faction-focused videos on stuff other than just Necrons, Grey Knights, soon some Death Watch and Custodies. For this, though, I want to talk about Necrons. So recently, I played a very, very interesting game that made me very happy because I got to use some of the units that I love in Necrons, all of the Canoptic units. And surprisingly, it went very, very well against my buddy Lane and his competitive Death Watch build. And we actually held out to a victory with the Necrons. But there was one thing that troubled me. Within the list, one of the linchpins was the Lychguard. And the reason that it troubles me with this is because Lychguard have been a very, very powerful, very common tool in a lot of Necron armies. Which means that there is a strong possibility here in the next couple of weeks, in September, as we're supposed to be seeing the datasheet updates, Lychguard might get hit. They may get hit pretty hard. We may see a point increase to them, which might cause them to really get shooken up for how much we're taking in the armies. I see some armies competitively that run 3 full 10-man squads. I see some that run 2. Me personally, I stick to 1. Because there's so much depth in the Necron Codex. And there is a lot of depth. We have a lot of options at a lot of different things. And that's where I kind of lean over the Canoptic build. One, I like to try and break the mold. I don't want to play everything that's just normally conventional. Because one, there's probably someone at your local game shop who's playing that build. Or two, it's the build that is most commonly seen. But what about the other units? What about the hidden gems? Just in this last game, I saw how powerful Canoptic Spiders are, how much damage they can do, and how good they are. And that makes me super happy. And we've seen, and time again in trying them, how much Scarabs have dropped from their glory that we saw once before. So what do we do with all this? What do we do with the fact, what if what I'm saying is true, and the Lychguard do get a point increase? And for how much do we still run them? If we take them out of the fold, what else can we do? What can we do without the Lychguard being in there defensively, especially with something like this Canoptic build that really, really requires me to have Technomancers or the Sovereign Cornell to be able to give the +1s to hit. And that's where I've been kind of stuck. Everything I've put together, everything I've tried to do with the Necrons keeps coming back to take a Technomancer, put it in Lychguard, and yes, I'm not getting the -1 to wound because he's not a noble, but it still protects. It protects that Technomancer, allows him to get into those areas to be able to buff my Canoptic units and give him the +1 to hits and everything else. I could take a Hexmark Destroyer, but you get within 12 and he's kind of squishy and he dies. And there's not a lot of other character options outside of a Technomancer with the Canoptic Cloak that have Lone Operative to be able to move with the Sovereign and power units on the front lines. And that's when I was talking with my buddy Zach and kind of came up with something kind of interesting that I want to try out the next time on the channel. And that is going over to Necron Warriors. 1 squad, a 20-man squad, with a Technomancer, with the Canoptic Control Node, and an Overlord with the Sovereign Cornell. So what I'm thinking about and what this is going to do for my army is it's going to allow me to, first of all, have a very strong centralized core. I'll be able to have the Overlord at the front of the Necron Warrior squad with the Technomancer in the back. Technomancer being able to buff things like the Doomstalker and other backfield units, which pretty much is just the Doomstalker, during the early components of the game. Then, as we move across the field, as the Warriors move into position, I can stretch out and have the Overlord be able to be into position to buff things like the Canoptic Spiders. Now, the Canoptic Spiders are really an interesting unit that I found in the last game because they have 2 of the particle beamers with devastating wounds. Being able to boost those guns up to +1 to hit and the amount of firepower they put down is devastating, no pun intended. Not to mention the fact that these guys are technically vehicles now, so they're getting the buff of their own 6 up field no pain, and they have access to one of my favorite stratagems in the game, Tank Shock. Meaning that when these guys hit and charge, you're looking at a little extra impact damage off one of them just on the charge. So, looking at the Canoptic Spiders and how much damage they can put down, not to mention they're in a weird state because they have reanimation, which means they can heal. They have the reanimation protocols, so they gain all the buffs of having reanimation protocols like the Canoptic Reanimators can boost for it. So, with that being said, this allows the spiders to be more of the forefront of this army, with wraiths that I include kind of being just a sideways pickup, and scarabs potentially getting reduced down to maybe just 2 units, or a third unit might only be a 3-man, because the ability to blow up is still really good for mortal wounds. And that's kind of where I started to look at this more. And started looking at the wraiths, looking at the spiders, looking at the tank shock, looking at all this stuff, and seeing this army can put out a lot of mortal wounds, devastating wounds, mortal wounds, all of it encompassing. And trying to see and figure out how can we put all of this extra firepower down? What am I missing in this fold that can boost these units to be able to give them more? I thought about the Silent King. And immediately, like, I gave him the valid time of day and put him in a list and built everything around it and went, wow, that is such a small list. I couldn't do it. Even on the reroll 1s to hit, reroll 1s to wound off of him, his ability for reanimation protocols for himself to be able to buff and power himself up, I just couldn't see doing it. I look at things like the Wraith Knight that could just obliterate him fast. And their towering aspect, and there's no way you're hiding the Silent King. But then I started looking at the Warriors with the Crypt Thrall in there. And I've seen some of the firepower. We've all seen some of the firepower that's done in this game. It's hard to remove the Warrior Brick. And it doesn't need to survive the entire game. It only needs to survive long enough to start pushing everything towards your opponent and push everything towards the objectives. Now, the difficulties do run into is that playing off the tactical objectives. When playing off the tactical objectives, we run into some of the cards like behind enemy lines and engage on all fronts that are not particularly strong, or the one for your opponent's deployment zone to just not particularly be able to get into those zones and do work on those. So, how do we play the tactical game if we can't progress? I've seen some people running Tomb Blades and stuff like that that are able to go out there. But me, I don't want to sacrifice anything. I don't want to sacrifice any of our resources. I want our resources to stay ours. So how do we engage on all fronts or behind enemy lines when we draw those? Yes, we have a command point strat to be able to shuffle one of those out. Okay, so one of those 3 we can shuffle out to not have to miss the points on that take. But now what about the other 2? Behind enemy lines, it's going to be really too tough to get in your opponent's deployment zone when you want to. Engage on all fronts, there might be some play there, especially with some of these quicker units, scarabs included. There's some possibility there. And then getting your opponent's deployment zone, not with this build. I have looked into the Monolith and talking about the Monolith and being able to use the Chronomancer to steal your opponent's home objective on a whim. but it's not as reliable as, you have to draw that card at that point in time. So those are three that kind of lead to a rough game. One of which being you can get rid of the other two. The other ones just come into luck and timing that maybe if you're pushing, you're able to move in and get a couple of points engaged on all fronts. So that is kind of a little difficult. And that's where it's been kind of a block, is I don't want to be fully pressed out of my opponent's deployment zone, but at that same time, playing KG off it if we can prevent our opponents from getting into our deployment zone entirely. Now we're stopping engage on all fronts. We're stopping behind enemy lines. And how can we do that? How can we stop those units? Well, Scarabs are a great starting point for it. Scarabs are not that expensive. They're a unit that we can kind of put in the backfield and forget about. And on top of it, with this Necron Warrior brick, we can cover more of the field. So being able to do that, instead of looking at it from the aspect of how do we score behind enemy lines, what if we look at it from how do we prevent our opponent from scoring behind enemy lines, or engage on all fronts, or taking our home deployment zone or deployment objective for those points, so we can make those dead draws for our opponents. So now we don't have to worry about that as much. And I think that's kind of the technique that I'm going with this Canoptic list, is I can't get these secondaries, so let's just prevent my opponent from getting them. So some of the things that I've been looking at with that, Wraiths are very quick, and I have Wraiths more as a frontline unit. Spiders are not as quick, they're bulky, and I like them for their damage output. Doomstalkers can cover the backfield pretty well, and that's one thing that I'm kind of trying to find where I want to put into possibly maybe some other unit to be able to be back there to give them a +1 to hit, so my warriors can move up with the front. Now, how much distance do I really need to move? And that's another thing that comes back to, it may sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm saying, well, if I'm not moving that far, why do I need another character if the warriors with a Technomancer and an Overlord can buff things like the Doomstalker and stuff like that? And it's just to be able to not allow my opponent to completely 100% know where I'm going to make the move and where I'm going to make the push. I feel like if I can control that part of the game a little bit and be able to have that chance of, okay, now is the time, break off and push the warriors and really push them and push everything around them with spiders and stuff like that, that we can keep good pressure on our opponent. But the warriors, 20 of them, you can get that thing pretty wide. And as your opponent starts picking them up and picking them off, you can still string it out, be able to keep a couple of guys in good positions to be able to string this out really, really far and get these two characters protected over a wide encompassment of the field. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And I know it was a lot of wishy-washy kind of theory and thought into this. But this is where, again, with the Necron community, specifically the Necron community, I have seen so much interaction and so much engagement with, hey, what about this idea? Hey, what about that idea? And so I wanted to put this out there. It's been a tough weekend. And here in Ohio, we've seen some insane weather lately. A lot of houses are flooding, trees getting knocked over. It's just been very, very stormy out here. Internet issues, weather issues, and everything like that. But I wanted to, and had some time to sit down and work on some rosters and stuff like that. And I've been kind of stuck. And it's also been trying to help some people out. Had a buddy of mine that had a tree fall and went over, was able to help him get the tree all situated and everything like that. Had another buddy that was ready to go run over to his house as well and help him with tree removal and stuff like that. I bought a chainsaw for a reason, might as well use it. But it's been tough. It's been tough. And I'm not looking, this isn't a sympathy thing, and that stuff. This is what we do. We're always, especially us who are Warhammer fans, we're definitely dedicated to this. And anytime I'm driving over there, I'm on the phone with someone talking about Warhammer. But some of my friends are not as enthralled with Necrons. They like the army, they like the way it looks, but they don't play them. I do. And here are some other people who are enthralled with Necrons, who have been thinking these same things, thinking, what do we do after the Lychguard? What do we do if the Lychguard get pulled? And also at that same time, we look at other units and go, man, I'd love to get this on the table, but it just doesn't seem to be working. Just doesn't seem this, does that. The point cost when we start overloading characters or warriors and stuff, our army gets expensive really quick. So, Necron Warrior. Necron Warriors with an Overlord and a Technomancer, both of which on the opposite sides to be able to control separate parts of the army and then converge into the middle to be able to take that center objective. I still feel like basically Necrons are one of the best center objective playing armies just because of the fact that we get onto that and make it very hard to take away. And if we could take a Necron Warrior squad and keep it alive and keep it protected deep into the game, especially the fact of an Overlord specifically, being able to zero out that reanimation strat is going to be huge, because then we'll be able to constantly keep bringing warriors back and make it really hard for our opponent to remove them. And the more that they put into the warriors trying to take them out, that's less damage that's going towards wraiths, spiders, doomstalkers, all the other things on the table, so that the warrior, those units, can get in position to pick things off. And if they take out the warriors and they leave us with two characters, as long as our opponent doesn't have artillery, we can hide those characters behind a wall and still give that buff and play it defensive and play it up to center field. In 9th edition, when I ran what I like the original Canoptic Harvest, which had double Catan in the list, that list, I basically drew a line across center field, and everyone said, hey, this doesn't... They looked at it like, well, how are you going to do this? Purge the Vermin isn't a good secondary and all this stuff. But my play style was to draw a line down center field and not let anybody cross that line. Now I'm looking at bringing that back, playing off center field, drawing a line down the middle and saying, if you move in close, I'm going to jump you with wraiths. If you move in too close, my spiders are going to jump out and just put every shot, every gun, all the damage onto you. And Doomstalkers that are able to basically shoot anywhere on the table throughout the game. They're really easy to get those guys in position and put a lot of damage on the table. And it's a lot of stuff, a lot of extra stuff. But the critical point of this is how to get past the fact that, and I was, pause on a moment. I really feel like that Games Workshop messed up the Technomancer on this. You give the Technomancer the Canoptic Control node, which allows him to buff Canoptic units, but he doesn't have Lone Operative. But then if you give him a Canoptic Cloak, he gets Lone Operative, but then for what purpose? So he can heal and float around the board? Yeah, you could give him the Sovereign Cornell to do that ability, and that's pretty good. That's not a bad thing. But the Canoptic Control node is specifically in there to buff Canoptic units. And you can't take him with Lone Operative and a Canoptic Control node, but then he can't join Canoptic units. He has to join Warriors, Immortals, or Lychguard, which are not Canoptic. You kind of see where I'm going with this. It's like it doesn't feel right. And that's one of the things that I feel like hopefully when we see some of the Necron things, if they give us other detachment style, we get maybe a Canoptic focused one and something that kind of fixes this. But I feel like we're missing a character that has the Canoptic Control node, the Technomancer, but it's still a Lone Operative. So we don't have to invest into a whole bunch of warriors and stuff like that. And realistically, once again, coming back to Lychguard, it's not even cost efficient to take 5 Immortals as a bodyguard for a Technomancer, when literally for 25 points more, you can get Lychguard. And it just doesn't, an extra wound, everything else, it's just so much better. So it doesn't even make sense to take the Immortals. But the Warriors kind of make sense. The Warriors reanimate really good. And with how many bodies are in that one unit, we can string that out to protect 2 characters that can both buff off of that. One with the Sovereign Cornell being the Overlord, and the other being a Technomancer. Now, the Technomancer, I'm probably going to get the Hyper Material Albator too. Sorry if I butchered that. So that makes my Necron Warriors -1 to wound, on top of having that feel no pain, making these guys really tough, and also just not completely right up in someone's face by putting a couple of them in cover, having the cover save, and after some of them get shot away that are starting to move out and are starting to bring the unit out there and cover extra part of the field, we can still move those buffs around the field and be able to still have the strength to do it. I think a big part of it comes down to the Doomstalkers and Spiders, which is what I really want to see the heavy damage coming out of. I think the Spiders are a kind of a diamond in the rough with the way their stats are set up, the way reanimations are set up, and how we have all these abilities. I feel like the Spiders are just something, there's something there with them that is so unique that really makes these guys just a very valuable unit. And that's why I'm still going to continue to run 6 of them. Looking to cut back on the Scarabs a bit. I think that they're going to end up turning into more of a backfield controlled cheap unit, where I have them to kind of cover out my backfield so I can't get units dropping in within 9, not giving up free and easy engage points, not give up free and easy behind enemy line points, use them to move, block, etc., etc., etc. I'm not sure how exactly I want to break it down. There's potentially a 6-man and 2-3. I still like having a bigger squad to be able to hit and blow up. And it's tough to say. I might keep all 3 6-mans in there to be able to hit and blow up, because again, with a lot of the Canoptic, there's a lot of mortal wound output. So those are guys that can kind of hold in the backfield and cover the back. And then when our opponent is not able to make a backfield immediate teleportation play, whether it's deep strike and stuff like that, then the Scarabs can start moving up. And when the Scarabs start moving up, now the opponent has to make a decision. Are your small arm fire weapons going to shoot at Scarabs, or are they going to shoot at Warriors? And that's another thing that I also want to look into and test. Are the Scarabs going to be still threatening enough to guard out where people are going to have to pick? Do you want to shoot at my Warriors, or do you want to shoot at my Scarabs? So that's kind of where I'm at. Oh, and when I say cutting the map in half, I'm a person who, with my play style, no matter what the map is, I always like to try to turn it to a hammer and anvil style deployment. The only one that's difficult out of is Dawn of War, but even so, I will push. I will push for that very, very much so, where it may turn into where our entire game is playing from over here or over here, because I deploy my entire army here, and you say, okay, I'm going to put my whole army here right in front of you, and we're just going to hit. So, but either way, we have table quarters. We start here, push out, move, boom, draw it down center field. Now I still have 2 objectives, and I'm still looking at holding the 1 at center. You have the table corner, the corners, which are all basically in that same fashion. You have this corner, you're here, wheel out, take the objective marker that's closer, and then press onto center. So these styles are going to be a style that I'm going to continue to move and maneuver forward with this army, and trying to hold center field with basically all these Canoptic units, and just hold the line, hold a wall. And if my opponent wants to try and get deep into my deployment zone, try and push forward into me, the answer is going to be Spiders that can tank shock, Wraith Spiders with devastating wound capability, Scarabs that can hit and blow up, and by all means, Doomstalkers with blast weapons that do 3 damage a pop. All right, guys. Well, that's kind of where I'm at. I've been kind of in a little bit of a block with this and trying to put this together. So this video is created as once again, like I said, I'm not, with many of my Grey Knight videos, this is not me trying to say I am the best or the master of Necrons and anything like that. No, I am a competitive Warhammer player who has tried his best to compete at the highest level as much as I can. And this is the view that I have on the Necron lists and Necron army for post-September, when we see, if and when we see Lychguard get hit. Now, if Lychguard don't get hit, that's going to change a lot of this conversation. But initially, I am concerned that Lychguard could get hit, and it's going to be, what do we do next? As well as the fact man, I love canoptic units. I love my spiders. I love my spiders. I love my scarabs. And I want to see them work. I want to see them make it happen. So this is more of like a research piece, if anything else, where I'm throwing out there my data, my findings, my thoughts, my beliefs, my theory, my hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. And I'm putting it out there and just opening myself up that for criticism, for ideas, for concept. Let's start the conversation, because I'm sure that there is somebody out there also who might be sad that their canoptic units aren't the top tier right now and would love to run more of the canoptic units, or just are, like me, a huge Necron fan with a massive collection and want to put a lot of other units on the table. I love my Lychguard. I'm glad to see they're back up and they're a great, powerful unit right now. But I'd also like to see a lot of the other Necron units make their mainstay and it not be, okay, I'm playing Necrons, start with Lychguard, and then what else? Whatever else doesn't matter. Do you have Lychguard? Okay, whatever else isn't as important, you have Lychguard. So, all right, guys, I look forward to reading all the comments in the comment section down below. I got quite a busy day ahead of me tomorrow. It's going to be we're still getting so much cleaned up. I got a little bit of a leak I got to get taken care of in the studio. And yeah, some more people. Hey, it's going to be good firewood season this year. It's going to be a lot of firewood out there. So yeah, guys, thanks as always for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.